Hello everyone, my name is Christian. Welcome back to Tekpon. Today our guest is Dan, the founder and chief pricing officer at product Tranquility. Hello.
Hi Christian, how you doing today? Good to be here.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining the podcast. Please tell us what your company does.
Hi, yeah, well my name is Dan Balcauski and I run a consulting firm based in beautiful Austin, Texas, a little warm at the moment, and we help high volume B2B SaaS CEOs define pricing and packaging for new and existing products.
What do people get wrong about pricing? What are the most common issues that you see?
We'll have to chop it down because there's a lot, but I think the number one thing is when it comes to SaaS pricing, most executives think that what you charge determines your success. In fact, who and how you charge determines your success. So I end up in a lot of conversations where companies are maybe at the end of their development process and nobody has really thought about pricing and packaging. They're about to release into the market and they're like, well, should this thing be $19 a user or $99 a user or $29.95? Should our prices end in 5s or 9s? And I'm always like, that is a very interesting conversation and I'm happy to answer those questions, but they're really focused on the wrong thing. It's much more impactful to really understand the customers you're going after and all of the other elements of packaging that define how you charge. So my general advice for folks is I would spend a lot more time on what the price tag goes on than what number goes on the price tag.
That's super smart. Yeah, I understand. Thank you for sharing. What are the 3 C's of pricing?
Yeah, so marketers love our little handy acronyms. So there's the 4 P's and you got the 5 C's and Michael Porter's 5 forces, and so 3 C's we use in pricing, and that's defines or helps lay out what is called a pricing orientation. So pricing orientations, we can think about them in terms of they kind of answer the question, how is pricing done around here? If we're inside a company, what are the factors that we really care about? What are the factors that we take into account that help us determine how we're going to set and justify the pricing that we come up with? And throughout this conversation, I'll use the term pricing, but I always mean pricing and packaging, but it gets a little bit awkward because you say pricing and packaging. So when we think about 3 C's, I'll just quickly rattle them off and then we can kind of go back through them a little bit. So the 3 C's are cost-based pricing, competition-based pricing, and customer value-based pricing. Often just said value-based pricing, but like I said, our marketers, we love our handy acronyms. And then you'd have 2 C's and a V, and that's not quite as catchy. So the 3 C's,
I understand.
I think the way we want to think about them, I think the healthiest way to think about them is they're a ladder. Most companies will start at a cost-based approach. And really what cost-based is we're going to try to understand what is our cost to build, produce, distribute, support our product in the field. And that's going to give us some semblance of, you don't want to be selling $20 bills for $10. You're going to be out of business very quickly. So we want to make sure that we're able to cover the costs that we're generating, right? But the problem is that while this looks very rational, very scientific, we could put it in a spreadsheet. Our cost for our Amazon bill every month is X, and so therefore I'm going to charge 10X. The thing is that while that feels very quantitative and math-based and rational, that 10X just came from you. That was just a qualitative judgment. There was no margin god that came down from on high and told your CFO or CEO, hey, this is how big your margin or markup should be. So it ultimately is still qualitative. And then it obviously has a couple of major drawbacks, which is it doesn't consider the value you provide your customers or their willingness to pay or what the competition is providing. So, but you do need to start somewhere, and so often companies will start cost-based. Because I'll be in these conversations a lot with founders or CEOs, and they'll say, "Well, we want to do value-based pricing." I'm like, "Great, love it." Very challenging. When we talk about value-based pricing, I describe it as sort of a North Star. It's a gleaming city on the hill that is to be strived for but never to be reached. It's very complex. Most companies, even very mature companies, very rarely pull it off. I think only about data I've seen, only about 20% of companies actually do real value-based pricing. But the thing is that you don't get to go do value-based pricing and not know your costs, because I'll turn around and be like, great, that's awesome. Happy you want to do value-based pricing. What is your cost to serve a customer? what across customer segments or however we want to, across different products. And they'd be like, oh, well, we don't know that. And it's like, well, all right, let's start with the basics, right? So because what we want to, you don't usually talk about it this way, but depending upon a stage a company is in as well, right, that this can be a helpful frame to think in, because they may want to focus. They don't overall want profitability from a P&L overall company perspective, but you do want to understand your unit economics, right, and be profitable on a unit economic basis, even though you might have large fixed costs of sales, marketing, development, et cetera. So let's go to the next step up. So then we kind of look at competitor-based pricing. Competitor-based pricing is nice because it allows us to get a sense of the context and the space that our customers are occupying, right? They have competitive alternatives, and I'll use that term competitive alternative specifically because, for a lot of SaaS products in the B2B space, the number one competitive alternative is an intern and a spreadsheet, an email. Right? How many workflow products? It's not the other competitor down the street, right? It's, we'll just do it the way we've always done it, right? Zoom competes with WebEx, but they're also competing with the telephone or email, right? So there's always going to be another competitive alternative, and I think this is kind of an old joke, which I think if the founders we don't have any competition, run away from that founder because they haven't really thought very hard about their problem, because there's always competition. There's always another way that your customer is trying to get that job done today.
Of course.
But maybe unless we talk about the brand new superconductor thing, because I don't know anybody who just doing, but that's, we go a bridge too far in terms of solution specific. So that's nice because it helps us, we think in terms of competition-based pricing. That's nice because, again, we get a little bit more context that our customers are in. But the problem is that I learned this very early in my career when I was running product management, product strategy groups, where you want to be very cautious of competitors when they announce new features, for example, because you can't assume that your competition has the same business goals, the same strategy, the same pressures, the same insights that you do. They could be running an entirely different playbook with entirely different goals, and that assumes they've done their homework at all. Maybe the new features they come out with is just whatever, maybe they've got a very loud CEO who just has the best ideas in the shower, and then all the product managers and developers have to go develop those. And so if you go just, well, oh my God, they built all these features, we have to go build those features, you're going to have a very short, unsuccessful career in product management, product strategy. You don't want to do that. And we don't want to do the same thing with our pricing. We don't want to end up in this herding mentality where we assume that our competitors, again, we know nothing about the trade-offs that they've made or their ultimate goals, or that they've done their homework. And I don't know any CEO that would outsource their marketing demand generation or their sales team or any part or their product strategy to a competitor, but yet people are perfectly acceptable to be like, well, our competitor charges X, so we'll charge 90% of X. And it's like, wait, you've just given a massive control of strategic lever directly in the hands of your competition, and you wouldn't do that with any other part of your business. So I think that, again, that's an improvement, but you're not quite all the way there yet. And then we layer on top of that is this idea of customer value-based pricing.
Yes.
And customer value-based pricing really gets us into, do we really understand the value we create for customers, the outcomes that we allow them to achieve, and one of the philosophical underpinnings we think through in value-based pricing is price is really just how a buyer and seller divide value in a transaction. So what we're going to create by us trading, we're going to create 10 units of value. As the seller, I'm going to give you 9 units of value and I'm going to take 1 for me, and we view that as a fair trade, right? So price is really that, how are we splitting the pie between us? Now, look, as I said before, all of the data points out that very few companies are actually truly doing value-based pricing. It's the hardest to pull off in practice. It requires a top-down commitment to value across the organization, because you can't just do value-based pricing. You have to have value-based messaging, value-based customer success, value-based selling, all of those components, you need some amount of maturity because, in order to prove and demonstrate your value to the market, they're going to demand proof points, right? So if you're early stage as a company, you probably have minimal amounts of proof points that you can demonstrate, sort of the ROI that you create. And it really requires a maturity on behalf of the organization that many organizations aren't prepared to take on, right? And then I think there's other aspects too that prevent people from fully adopting that mindset. It can be scary. There's not as, like I was talking about the cost-based pricing aspect before, and it's CFOs really like it. We can put everything in a spreadsheet, and it's all very clean, and it feels like
Yes.
a very rational response. With value-based pricing, it feels a lot more fuzzy, and you feel like you're a little bit more taking a risk. People don't like that. They like to have even a non-scientific answer, even if it feels more scientific, they feel more comfortable with that. So that could be a problem. And then usually it requires a commitment to, really understanding your customers, which requires qualitative and quantitative research, right? So that could be expensive, and the data is not necessarily clear of how to get it. So those could be impediments, but those are, ways that we think about maturity of pricing orientations in companies.
Thank you very much. It was a very complex answer, but I think you explained it great and with a lot of examples. So we'll remember that, the 3 C's of pricing. Now I wanted to ask you, how does pricing differ from company stages? When they start seed stage, Series A, and later on? What do you think changes? Pricing, packaging, and...
Yeah. So I think, there's a couple of different things that change, right? So I think the earliest stages, right, the founders own pricing because there's no one else to own it. And in large established companies, you might have pricing owner or a pricing person with a pricing title or a pricing team even. But even that's relatively rare. I think it's from the data I've seen, I think it's less than 25% of the Fortune 500 have dedicated pricing owners in their companies. So that's still relatively rare. I think the other kind of in between that is, generally I recommend product marketing should own pricing as part of their responsibilities, and we can talk about why. I think what ends up happening is a couple of things. So if we think about the growth of a business, founders sitting around in a room, probably on a Sunday or Saturday with burning the midnight oil, and they're like, all right, we got to price something. They spend all of 4 hours talking about how they're gonna price and package the thing, and then that kind of gets set. And then if you think about the company starts, being somewhat successful, they need more salespeople to sell the product, need more marketers to generate demand, they need more support people to support the product, they need more developers to write the code. But at no point does it become clear like, oh, we need to bring someone in to own this pricing thing. And so I think one thing that tends to happen is that it just kind of gets left on the side, and the founders de facto own it. But they don't really know much about it, and also, it affects everyone. So because they don't know much about it, they kind of treat it as a black box, magic voodoo, and kind of don't want to touch it. But then also no one else at the company was empowered necessarily to touch it. So this is why I think one of my number one pieces of advice for folks is to have a direct pricing owner. Again, probably that person in product marketing, and then have some sort of pricing governance. So a pricing committee and a pricing process. It's defined in times of rational thought where it's not sort of, oh my God, it's end of quarter and we're not going to make our numbers, and so everyone's like, oh well, we'll just bend the rules this one time, right? And as anyone who's been around the block knows, just this one time becomes the habit of the company over time. This is. At different stages of company progress, right, you're going to have a very different levels of precision, for example, needed, right? So at the earliest stages, I would say, pricing is not one of the things that is necessarily the most important. I would say, you need to have unit economics that make sense, but you've probably got bigger issues like getting to a product market fit that are more important. And then at the largest scales, right, you're going to have, massive amounts of precision needed on any changes, right? You're going to have the CEO of Coca-Cola trying to eke an extra 1% of EBITDA out of their their numbers, right? But to do that, right, there's going to be a significant amount of investment. The good thing about the early stages is there's so much uncertainty. They need less data to actually make progress in a
Yes.
way. But there's a bunch more I could say on that, but I'll see where else you want to take it.
Okay, and now I'd like to discuss freemium versus free trial. When should companies choose one or another, and why? How should they think about it?
Oh man! So what I would say is, anytime anyone breathes the word freemium to you, your reaction should be free trial instead. Let's think about why that is. So, free trials I'm highly in favor of. What does a free trial or freemium do, right? So they both have some merits, right? So I'm a fan of them both, and then we'll talk about why they diverge.
Yes.
A free trial or freemium helps the prospective buyer experience the value of your product in a direct way. So what it does is it increases your perceived value of the product. As good as your marketing team is, your designers, your copywriters, your demand gen experts, creating white papers, creating websites, intro videos, whatever it might be, talking on podcasts about how great your product is. All of that engages a different part of the brain. And then if you launch into a product and you have it has data from your environment, there's a light that goes off in the mind that says, "Oh, now I get it. Now I understand." So that is incredibly valuable, and that's B2B software is not unique in this understanding. I don't know how it is in your country, but in the U.S., if you go to the grocery store on, say, a Saturday or Sunday, there's often these little folks handing out like pieces of sausage or a cracker on a little toothpick, right? Giving you free sample, like, "Oh, hey, try our, smoked kielbasa, whatever." And you're like, "Oh, okay, let me try." Like, oh, that's actually pretty good, And then sometimes you're like, "It's not for me," and sometimes you're like, "Oh, I'll take one of those, whatever it is." It's the same idea, right? It's the same idea. So why is freemium a terrible idea? So I spent, I belabor this point, but I spent a whole bunch of my time looking into freemium at a deep level. In general, it is a terrible idea because, one, best-in-class freemium companies, they convert 1 to 3% of their free users. Now, I want to be careful here, right? So I focus a lot, or almost exclusively at this point, on B2B SaaS. So I think B2C, maybe this argument doesn't hold as well, but on the B2B side, what does that mean? That means I need a total addressable market of potentially millions of accounts in order to make that math work. So why is that? Well, look, what are some of the downsides? What am I doing? I'm very much of the opinion that intelligent price management starts with intelligent value management. And when you give something away for free, what are you telling the market about your product? You're telling them it's not worth anything. Okay?
Yes.
So you've worked against your own best interest. Those free users in general are just as hard to convert as net new folks you bring in off the street. But that's not the sense inside the building. I've been on the other side of conversations inside of companies where they have a freemium approach. And look, you've got very hardworking CMOs and chief growth officers. Those people get all the respect in the world. It's an incredibly hard job to bring in new leads. And so you can imagine they're working day in, day out in their SEO and paid search, whatever, organic, social, whatever it might be. And they say, "Look, we're working so hard over here. We've got 99% of our user base is over here on the free side. Hey, product team, if you and the UX team just got together, hey, there's a couple of features that a bunch of them say they want, and if you build those, they're going to convert. Or if we just change the onboarding flow, to make the value to these folks much more relevant, then they're going to convert. And it's a mirage. It just doesn't work. It creates a bunch of unhelpful conversations inside the business. It puts a tax on the velocity of your, I'm sure, already overstretched product engineering teams and design teams. And ultimately, like I said, most of those people are not your customers. Most of those people will not convert. Furthermore, I've seen it gets worse. So the other thing that ends up happening, I've seen this in fact, is that most of those folks are not in your target customer segment. So I was working, one of my clients had a freemium approach, and it was kind of funny because it was a company where the entire management team had got brought in after they had acquired the company, and nobody liked the freemium approach, but they also just didn't want to break it. So they were like, yeah, we don't like it, but we'll just leave it alone. So I was doing some research for them, I was looking at reviews of the software. So there's like Trustpilot or something like that, user reviews. And it's a B2B SaaS company. These user reviews are always like, oh, it's great for, I use it with my family to, with my kids, blah, blah, blah. And it was like review after review. And I was like, what is going on here? And what I realized is these are all the free users, right? These are all the free users that are using it for their home. And so now you've also polluted your go-to-market. Now you're trying to, this company's trying to grow. Maybe they've got a high volume velocity product-led growth model, and that machinery is working well. And now they're trying to go up market to some more mid-market accounts or maybe enterprise. And you imagine this enterprise customer is like, let me go see what the reviews are for this place. So I use this for my kids. You've just lost all credibility, and that's 97% of your reviews because those aren't your customers. So I just think it's a terrible idea, kind of across the board. There are a couple of exceptions. Yeah. I'll point out a couple of exceptions. One is in the developer tool space, it can make sense. If you imagine that there's an engineer who's using a piece of software, right? They've got to maybe develop with the software in staging and development for 6, 9, 12 months, right? They're not rolling anything to production yet. They're just playing around, right? But so in that case, you don't really have a buyer there because that person's not actually using it. They're using it, but they're just trying to get software built, and they haven't really started to extract value by having it in production as a monetizable feature of whatever they're wrapping around it. So in that case, it may make sense to have a freemium offer that's you're not trying to do anything with. You just realize that it doesn't make any sense for your sales team to continue extending free trial keys over and over again, right? So that could be one case. And then I think the other case that gets brought up quite a bit is a product like Slack. But I think Slack is quite unique. They almost have what's called a cold start problem in a marketplace model, which is, look, we can't put any friction on the front end of having users in the product because the product itself is not valuable unless everybody is on it, right? And so it just needs some sort of flywheel itself before, it's not like a piece of workflow software where you as an individual user could use it, and if your coworkers don't use it, you'd still get value out of it. Slack doesn't work that way, and so it just has a very unique flywheel effect that needs to get started. And so from that perspective, I think it makes sense. But again, I think these are the kind of exceptions, right? It's much better to start with a free trial than it is freemium, and I think free trial gets you most of the way there.
Understood. Totally understood. Thank you so much. How can a company tell if their pricing is optimized or broken? Are there any metrics that we should track? How can we think about it?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different ways I think about this. So let's split it into kind of high-level strategic aspects. So, look, if I was talking to the CEO, look, are you meeting your goals? Is pricing getting away those goals? If you've implemented a pricing change or increase, did it succeed? If not, why not? Why do you lose deals? What role has price played compared to other factors? Those would be, there's obviously others, but on the other side is kind of things more tactically. Like, are too many customers buying and staying in your entry level plan? Are too few customers upgrading or expanding? Is sales regularly selling something that is customized for each deal, right? So we want to kind of look at some of those broad-based questions. In terms of different metrics, things I want to be looking at are percent of deals lost to pricing. Good rule of thumb is, if you're priced accurately, you should lose about a third of your deals based on pricing. I think one misconception though is, price is usually not, it's in B2B context, it tends to be somewhere between like the third and seventh most important factor in a deal. So versus in B2C, it tends to be right at the top. I think that's where some places where we get confused as we go from a B2C to a B2B context. I mean, you could think about all the scenarios that you don't want the cheapest thing, right? Like you're going to get surgery, right? Do you want the cheapest surgeon? Like, I don't know, my buddy, he could do it for $20. Like I'll pass. Like, he might be a great person, but in B2B, there's usually a lot more risk, right? There's reputational risk if the thing doesn't work. There's performance risk, right? If this thing is critical, it's going to really help. You can imagine you're buying a piece of equipment for a factory floor, right? That's going to be right in your line of operations. If that thing breaks down, like it's going to be a massive financial penalty, right? And then also it's going to be egg on your face as the person who brought it in. Like, you might be willing to pay, 1 or 2 orders of magnitude more than the next person if the thing had guarantees associated with it, right?
Absolutely.
But we do want to keep track of kind of percent of deals lost to pricing. The other thing I might look at is things like competitive win rate. The number of won opportunities divided by the total number of opportunities for a given competitor. Look, both of those things, they can suffer from data hygiene problems. So, we want to always be careful that, how we're using this type of data, right? Like, it can be very difficult. Sales reps don't always accurately or consistently tag competitors in a CRM. Sometimes prospects won't disclose who else they're evaluating, right? So in that case, you could lose to a competition, or you could lose to no decision, but you might not know the absolute truth. And also there's sampling bias. So you win 0% of the deals in which you aren't involved, right? So there's going to be a kind of a omitted bias problem there. And when it talks about deals related to price, I always talk about we should have win-loss codes and use them and ask salespeople to use them or have processes such they populate them. But I never want to take the CRM's win-loss data as the absolute gospel. It's a good starting point, and I think when we kind of apply that lens of a third of deals lost to pricing, it's directionally accurate, right, to determine if there's a real big issue. But too often, it's the easiest thing for a prospect to say of, hey, your price is too high, to tell reps you want them to go away, right? It's like, it was price, right? I don't want it, because the thing is, right, this is where it could also help to have an external party come and do win-loss analysis for you and do deep dive qualitative discussions with your lost prospects. Because look, I mean, Christian, I'm sure you're a nice guy, so I don't mean this personally, but let's say you're trying to sell me a piece of software. At some point, I don't know, you made me feel stupid because I didn't understand something about the product. Not because you intended it, but that's I was particularly not feeling great about myself that day. It just kind of gave me a weird feeling about doing business with your company. And so at the end of it, when you're like, well, why didn't you buy? I'm not going to tell you that. I'm not going to be like, oh, you made me feel uncomfortable. Because then you're going to be like, why? And I'm going to be like, I would feel more uncomfortable. So we're just going to say price. And so that will probably be more prevalent in your CRM win-loss codes than would be if you actually kind of had a neutral third party who wasn't involved in the deal. I'm a big fan of not having anyone in the sales organization do win-loss, marketing, product, or have a third-party firm come in to do it, because there's too much incentive to not be completely truthful otherwise.
It amazes me how many things you know, and this conversation was super insightful. I'm curious to know, how did you learn so much about pricing?
Oh man, well, I learn every day. So I constantly, in my conversations with clients, I'm learning, different aspects of their pricing and operations that, maybe didn't occur to me depending upon their specific models. I read a ton. So I've a lot of, most of my book reading is pricing books. It makes me real fun at parties, I'm sure. I got my theoretical foundations in pricing in business business school, so I didn't realize it, but I was very lucky. The program I went to was really well renowned for marketing, and I didn't find this out too much later, is that most business schools don't even have classes in pricing, and so I took several there, and then I got some real world experience kind of right away. In my MBA internship, I worked for a very successful Silicon Valley startup that they asked me to look at the freemium challenge, that they were trying to decide whether or not to do freemium, and that was back in 2011. So my arguments still apply today. I continue looking for disconfirming information, but I haven't found it. And then, I cut my teeth and, made a lot of mistakes along the way as a product leader, getting involved in pricing discussions and product strategy. And so, saw a lot of mistakes or made a lot of mistakes. And also I was pretty lucky. One of the company I was at as a product leader, we acquired a ton of other businesses. And so I got to see a lot of mistakes that early companies make from that lens as well.
But when did you start the current company, Product Tranquility?
So I've been almost exactly 4 years now, or just over 4 years now. Yeah.
But you probably have more than 15 years of experience in pricing.
Well, at about this point, probably 15 in pricing specifically. So yeah.
Wow. And do you have any other team members, or is it just you?
So yeah, I run solo, but I bring on folks for both front office and back office support as needed. So I didn't go into this to build the next McKinsey or BCG. So some people want to build big consulting firms. I just wanted to solve interesting problems with interesting people, and so feel like I've been pretty successful at doing that. But that doesn't. I reserve the right to be smarter tomorrow than I am today. So if my opinion changes in the future, that's just because I got smarter. But right now, I enjoy running it solo and bringing on help as I need it on a project basis.
That's fantastic. I love your mindset, and I'm super happy for you. It seems it's working great. Is there anything else that you want to mention on today's podcast? You already gave us a lot of value, and I'm super grateful for that. But maybe you want to share some other things for B2B SaaS founders.
Oh man, that's a wide open question. I would think, look, there's a bunch of different directions I can take that, and I think the number one kind of takeaway is your pricing is a process. Many people feel like it's an event in time, and that's just not the case. We as product leaders or as founders, as CEOs, we are constantly adjusting the value side of the equation. And one thing I hope people take away from this conversation is that value and price are intimately and foundationally linked. And if we are not revisiting our pricing in line with how our value is changing, right? And even if we're staying stagnant, our competitors are not, right? We've got AI or whatever happens to be the thing of the day, right? New competitors, new products, whatever happens in the marketplace, which means our differentiated value is changing. And so therefore, we need to embed pricing as a practice and as a process inside of our companies. And I think too many companies are like, well, we did that pricing thing when we launched the product 5 years ago, and so that's good. And you're like, has the product or market not changed in 5 years? Like, if it has, that would be surprising. I'm, especially in this day and age, right? Like, maybe if you told me back in 1900, oh no, the product and the market haven't changed, I'd be okay, I get that. But in 2023, there's no way. And so I think the faster the companies that really embrace that mindset, it doesn't become such a big, scary black box. They're able to build that organizational muscle. And look, if you need help building that organizational muscle, call someone like me. I'm happy to, get you started. But also I like to see people be able to walk and run on their own, like raising a child, right? I don't want to sit there and it's nice for a retainer business, but ultimately I want to see you be able to have that on your own.
Absolutely. Now, every time I talk about pricing, I'll recommend people go to you because I see you as truly an expert, and you're super passionate about what you do. Not only that you have the insights, but you really enjoy it, and you enjoy helping others. So thank you so much for joining the podcast. It was fantastic, and a lot of things I wasn't aware of, and I'm super grateful that we had this conversation. Really unique, and super happy to promote it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christian. I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you for having me.